There are many famous sayings from St. Augustine, but the one that encompasses the musical aspect is this one: he who sings well prays twice. For the Church, chant has been a fundamental aspect, especially when carrying out liturgical celebrations. But not just any kind of chant. The Second Vatican Council gave greater importance to Gregorian chant. See point 116 of the Constitution Sacrosanctum Concilium. The Church recognizes Gregorian chant as the proper chant of the Roman liturgy. All other things being equal, therefore, it must be given first place in liturgical actions. Without excluding other types of musical variety, in the case of Gregorian chant, it is recognized as the proper chant of the Latin Rite. The name Gregorian has much to do, precisely, with the Pope. It was St. Gregory the Great. During his pontificate at the end of the 6th century, he undertook the task of consolidating the liturgy of the Western Church. He gradually unified other forms of worship. For example, the Gallican form in France, the Ambrosian form in Milan, and the Hispano-Mozarabic form in Spain. As a result of this, the Roman liturgy was gradually implemented. This type of chant was used in it. It was Gregory himself who brought together the chants used in the Gallican and Roman liturgy, resulting in a musical compilation. Years later, it would be named Gregorian chant in his honor. His memory is celebrated every September 3rd. In addition to being the 63rd Pope of the Church, he was the first monk to become the successor of Peter. Along with St. Augustine, St. Ambrose, and St. Jerome, he is one of the most influential Holy Fathers of the Latin Church. He is also a doctor. It wasn't until 7 centuries later, in 1295, that Pope Boniface VIII granted him this title. His remains are in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome.
Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Neon. I am here with Geeky Sparkles.
Hello.
And I think we have a coda to the great hat snatching debacle at the U.S. Open. The Polish CEO who swiped a hat from a kid, and he's apologized. He's apologized. Now the entire internet hates him. Now that his business is taking a hit. He's real sorry, guys. He even mailed the hat back to the kid.
Yeah, I mailed it back to the kid. Yeah, I'm just like, it took days for him to do this, and now it's like, I basically you fucked around, found out, and now it's actually causing you real world problems. So you want to say you're sorry now? Right
now, apparently the manifesto that he was gonna sue everybody. He's saying it's not him. I think it was him, and I think it just didn't go the way he thought it was going to go. On a job board, we did a video on that. On a job board, someone said that he was threatening to sue people for defamation. Why is that always the go-to? Why is that always the go-to? Like, it's really hard to prove that, dude. But he was going to threaten people if they left him negative comments and yada, 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 and he was going back and forth with people. And then a couple days later, he apologizes. I'm like, I think it was him. I 100% think it was him, and he's just denying it was him. Because, you know, again, if he was going to apologize, you think he'd do it right away before that other person went and started spurting out on, you know.
When we had the Coldplay concert, that happened too, and there was a statement, and they said that one was made up. But this one, like, it was the media who found the statement.
Yes.
And they supposedly went to his account and stuff. I don't know that, but that's what they were saying. And it was across many, many outlets. So I'm, in my opinion, I'm more inclined to believe that he did do it, and he strikes me as kind of, and the fact he waited this long to actually, you know, do anything to correct the situation tracks with somebody who's being an arrogant dickwad.
Yeah, he's only doing this to save his ass, because at this point, it's too late. Like, I would have been like, oh, if I were really sorry and I was like, oh, I mistakenly took the hat, I'd be like, oh my God, they think I took a hat from a kid. Did I take a hat from a kid? I'd be like, let's find that kid and give him the hat, because I didn't mean to do that.
Oh, he never said that he didn't do it on purpose.
Well, yeah. So let's look at his apology, his explanation, apology, whatever, and they'll get memory hold. But yeah, the guy,
it will.
He just looks like a douchebag. It would have gotten memory hold a lot sooner if he just, you know, apologized right out of the gate,
or just not been an asshole to begin with.
Not been an asshole. So before we get into it any further, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. You'll get a woohoo if you do.
Woohoo!
Go out to Kickstarter. Geeky has her glowing ghouls retro enamel pins. And we're over 10,000, so there is a Geeky Witch pin coming. We're finalizing the design on that, and hopefully tomorrow, I think we'll probably have it up.
I'm very excited.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you very much for the support, guys. If you don't know what this is about, Geeky has designed some retro enamel pins. They glow in the dark. These were all designed by her and then converted to Vector by our pin partners who work in Vector, because that's how it works. And they do have glow-in-the-dark elements. Every one of them has something that glows in the dark. So check it out. That's on Kickstarter. Here's his apology. I think his name is Peter Scissorczyk. I don't know what the hell Scissorczyk. I can't pronounce Polish names. I'm sorry. We even have neighbors that their last name is Polish, and it's all consonants, and it took me like 3 years to figure out how to pronounce their last name. I swear to God. And they're great people.
That's like
I always call them by their first name because I'm
Germanic
like, I can't even pronounce
bro.
your last
You know that,
name.
right?
I'm not even going to try.
You know Germans
in
hate
connection
Poles,
with
right?
the incident that occurred during that occurred during Camille Maychek's, I think I got that right, Camille Maychek's match at the U.S. Open. I would like to unequivocally apologize to the young boy, his family, the fans, and the player himself. I take full responsibility for my extremely poor judgment and hurtful actions. It was never my intention to steal away prized memento from the young fans.
Yes, it was never your intention. That you clearly deliberately did it, hurried up and hit the bag and were smirky about it.
I became caught up in the heat of the moment and the joy of the victory, and I believed he was handing a hat to me to give to my sons who had previously asked for autographs. Regardless of what I believed was happening.
Whoa. His sons who aren't even there.
Under the bus now.
And he was going to give it to him to give to his sons, but he didn't turn around to give it to his kids. He gave it to his wife and put it back. Where, if his wife and him were there, where were his kids?
And then, yeah, right?
You got a crisis.
Regardless of what I believed was happening, the actions I took hurt the young boy and disappointed the fans.
If you watch the video again, the dude clearly took the hat from the kid.
Yeah.
The kid even let him know he took the hat from the kid, and he didn't give it back to him. If he accidentally took it and he didn't realize it was for the kid, when the kid was like holding on to it, and he would have been like, especially as a dad, oh, this kid wants it. This kid had his hand on it. This kid thinks I'm taking it. I'll just be like, oh, I'm sorry. I thought he was giving it to me, but you go ahead and take it. He could have done any of those things, but that's not what he did.
No. Yeah, so okay, I think he's lying. I have sent the hat back to the boy and extended my sincere apologies to his family. I hope at least to a small extent I was able to repair the harm I caused. I also want to state clearly, neither I nor my wife nor my sons commented on the situation on social media or any other platform. We did not hire any law firm regarding this matter. All statements appearing online and credited to us were false and were not authored by us or our representatives. For years, my wife and I have been involved in supporting children and young athletes, but this incident has shown me that a moment of inattention can undo years of work and support. It's a painful but necessary lesson in humility. Going forward, I will engage even more actively in initiatives that support children and youth, and I will take actions against violence and hate. I believe that only for fuck's sake. I believe only through actions I can rebuild the trust I have lost. I apologize. Please understand, for the sake of my family, I've decided to disable the ability to comment on this post. Dude, it was like days after the fact. I believe he was, because he just, look, I'm sorry, he just looks like a smug douchebag. Every picture of him.
He's like a big tennis fan or sports fan in general, but and now everybody's like, you're a dick, including the players, and it's probably like, oh, this sucks because now they even think I'm an asshole.
Yeah.
And they won't, they're not gonna let me kiss their ass anymore and stand with them for photos.
Yeah, that's exactly it. They're gonna be like, oh, you're that guy, you're the hat guy. Get out of here, hat guy.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, he claims it was just a mistake during the excitement over his fellow countrymen's win. Which, I mean, look, I get you're at a sporting event, it's chaotic, I get it, but like literally,
this wasn't one of those instances.
The kid had his hand on the hat at the same time he had his hand, and he had to lean over to give. The guy was handing the hat to you. Yeah. Why did you have to lean over to get it?
He was just being a dick. And then his kids aren't even there. Oh, I thought he was giving it to me for my children. Why would he? Your kids aren't there. There's kids right there, and he's clearly handing it to the little boy.
Yeah, so yeah, he's...
And then why'd you take days to apologize?
When you set up the needle.
Yeah, exactly. Because he was too busy, I believe, freaking out on social media and then saying it wasn't him. I think it was him.
And we know people were leaving negative. And so Google was protecting his business and removing negative reviews, which, I mean, to be fair, there's a difference between being mad at him and saying he's a piece of shit and that's your opinion.
Yeah.
And there's then going to deliberately leave bad reviews that weren't warranted on a business. So, of course, Google's going to remove, obviously, fake reviews.
Right.
And that's when you could get into trouble, is if you're deliberately putting things up that aren't true to cause him harm. You could have technically argued that was problematic. But just saying, I think he's an asshole, it's my opinion he's an asshole, wasn't enough to get and it had caused any problems.
Let's take one more look at this in slow motion. I think it's just because it's going to cost him, because he's in tennis circles and stuff too, and I think it's going to.
Yeah, that's what I think it is.
Hand in that clearly to the kid. To the kid. Intercepted. Yeah.
He didn't even look at the kid. He knows the kid wants it. He sees the kid talking.
The kid had his hand on it, folds it up.
Oh, that's when his kids were there? That's his kid that was there next to before? Is that what he's trying to say? I don't know.
There's a lot of
But the kid's not there anymore. He's giving it to that kid.
Yeah, he's giving it to his wife. Yeah, sorry. I don't buy it. I think you're just a douchebag, entitled douchebag, gives it to his wife.
Hurries up and hides it in her bag really fast.
Yes. Like, why?
Like, he turns it to put it down by his side so the kid can't take it.
Because I'm like, if you're giving it to your kid, you would have given it to your kid, not your wife to stick in
Exactly.
the bag.
Where are
Right?
the kids?
Yeah. So I'm like, yeah, no, you're a dick. You're a dick, dude. And you got busted being a dick. But that's okay. The world knows you're a dick. But don't forget about it tomorrow anyway. If you just apologize, within 24 hours of it happening, I mean, it blew up on the internet. There's no way he didn't know the entire world hated him. And the only reason he's apologizing now is because he knows he can't worm his way out of it.
Yeah, and because, probably in the tennis circles, they all know who he is, and they're going to be like, he probably does all this stuff, probably pays a shit ton of money, he gets to be part of it, and they're like, you're not allowed to be here anymore.
Yeah, because you're a hat stealing.
Well, they were petitioning to get him removed from the U.S. Opens and stuff.
Damn.
They were. I don't think they're going to, but they were trying to.
Anyway, we're going to wrap this up.
Yeah.
There we go. So,
those are some big balls. I'm not talking about him.
Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants. We'll talk later.
Bye.
For more pop culture news, views, and rants, go to news.clownfishtv.com. That's news.clownfishtv.com.
Ja, teissätänne. Kuningat nahas näkee, ja tii todit jiinin, niin otsanaat, niin pasas siin trappaan edasit se rokea aane edasit nari. Aput ei jähdi tänne. Nahastiin steissa. Täällä on tiinikahannen, leninkin tuopa, jyy jähdi oppina hoitunta, piipaa taati tein. Kaadeen ajassa tänne. Kujina tahaa naado, kuulit netkahosia. Ado annanen taati, kata pohje jähdi. Hai siitä, eikin siitä, tiinde. Ei se ei jähdi, Balkanika se veikkäsnet ole sisään. Among the traditional teachings of our people, there are a lot of information in that is being forgotten, and it's not being passed on to the generations and that follow in proper sequence. And so we would share with you some of the basic information of when our people first came into this particular area of this continent known as the Southwest. And it is that our people continually say that we came from the east, and we came from that direction under the direction of the holy people, and they brought us to this area where the mountains end. And it is that would be probably the area that is known now as southern Colorado and the southeast Utah, and eventually down into this northeast Arizona and northwest New Mexico. But the property and the lands in that Dene occupied after they came into this area was a peaceful arrival. Our Dene were very peaceful people because our principal holy person, and that is the speaker of peace, or sometimes it's pronounced and he's the one that has the leadership of the 12 men that are called Hasteja Hawan, which is the ones that give peace in the home. And so they were very peaceful people. But when they came among the people that had already occupied the area here in the greater Southwest, they went among the people, and the people that lived in this area, many of them became the Nek themselves. Give me them shit. And the ones that really were in great numbers was the people that they called the Tzedekina, or Tzayatane, or Tzayatane, or Tzathatane. And so there were a number of different Dene, or actually people that became Dene. And their clan groups are known by those names and that I just gave. And they are the cliff dwellers. And they were in great numbers. And those are all of the people that became Dene eventually. And today we still have some of those clans among our people. And it is that there were other groups of people. And Ayakini was another group of people that our people encountered. And those were the people that we would call modern day Pueblos.
That was good, bro. You tried to hit me with that fucking car.
And that was the name that was given to that particular group of people. They are the ones that made their homes out in the open, out of rock and clay. And so those Pueblo groups were a group of them that was probably maybe even 30 or 35 different Pueblo groups and that were people that our Dene encountered after they arrived here. And the arrival of the Dene is around 2,000 years ago. And when I first heard the stories and that, and how the people reckon time, they said, which would be, Nache is 102 years, and when they say which would mean 19 generations ago, so that would be 1900 years ago, that our people came into the area, and they came into the southern Colorado, what is now southern Colorado, and before they crossed over the mountains, probably through what is Gunnison Valley, and out toward what is present-day Grand Junction, and then moving south. At one time, they occupied a large area. And as I said, the first people that they really came in contact with were the cliff dwellers. And those were the people that became the Ne. And then the other people that were recognized as the Pueblo people, they were also encountered at some point. But most of the people lived along where there was access to water. And in many cases, those were along the rivers and that were contributaries to the San Juan River, the Colorado River, and some of these other places where there was water available in great abundance. Our people did the net when they encountered the first group of people that they came in contact with, being the cliff dwellers. They began to establish peace. And as a peaceful society, the Ne were able to attract many people. So many people came from various areas of this part of the continent, and many of them became the Ne. And of the numbers on that, they say there was as many as 147 different clan groups, different groups of people that came from distant areas. And some of the clan families still have stories of how their clan came from some direction or some place. And they traveled for many days and many cycles of the moon before they were able to get here. And they did have a lot of hardship with running out of food and running out of water. And sometimes really not sure where they were at or where it was that they were supposed to go. But the clan families on that, all of them have some story of their clan origin. And it's very important to have some knowledge of that. And so the very first groups on that, of the early Dene, encountered the cliff dwellers and the Pueblo people who were already here. And the many of the Cliff Dwellers, of course, eventually became the
Ended with
Neh.
3 cops holding me
And they
down.
still have their clan names. And one of the ones that I mentioned is Chechikina. And those were the ones that really lived here. Now, after the Neh had been here for Dinache, which is about 400 years, and then there was another group of people that came into the area, and they were the ones that become known as Anaasaza. The word Anaasaza does not mean ancient enemy.
And you need a hole put in.
The word Anaasaza, Ana, means something that is different. People that believe different than we do. People that do things different than the way we are doing things. That is what it means, Ana, and it doesn't mean enemy. And so the Anaasaza is the name is those that do things different, those that are different than the Neh is the name that was given to those people that our people encountered after they moved into this part of the continent. And that was about 400 years after they first came into the area. And the Anaasaza is the way that the stories are told about the Anaasaza. They were not a good people. They had many evil practices in that our people just could not accept. But they tolerated because they were a peaceful people, and they allowed the Anaasaza to remain among them for a period of time. And the period of time that the Anaasaza were here was probably some 300 years or even less, because it was that they could tolerate them no longer. And it was not the Neh that waged war against them, because the Neh would not do that. But the holy people are the ones that brought the change of weather. And the big winds, Niyotso is what our people call it. Niyotso is the big winds, and that covered all of their fields and their homes and everything. They covered them with sand. And it was that the Niyotso is what destroyed most of the people that we would call Anaasaza, but they were here for only a short period of time. And what they did is they made slaves of so many of the different people that never became the Neh. And some of those people and groups of people are the ones that we had called Ayakin at one time. But after the Anaasaza had left and had gone away or had been destroyed, they called them Kisani. So after the Anaasaza was no more, the people that had been slaves became known as Kisani. And so those are the things that I was told.
Oh, careful, leaving her out there. Yep. I can't
Thanks
believe
for watching our videos.
how big
If you
this
like what you see, don't
25-year-old
forget to
game is,
subscribe
dude.
and hit that notification bell so you never miss
I
one of our
remember it being
uploads.
big,
Also,
but,
head over
like,
to our website, NavajoTraditionalTeachings.com.
that
Sign up
was-
for our
that's
email
pretty
list.
big, dude.
Okay.
This video is brought to sat down in front of the TV every night and watched the same man, Johnny Carson, the host of The Tonight Show. For many, he was the last voice they heard before going to bed every night. A safe, amusing, and comforting constant throughout decades of turbulence and uncertainty. Writer Kenneth Tynan opined that Johnny Carson's blend of staying power and mounting popularity is without precedent in the history of television. When Carson finally decided to call it quits in the early 90s, fellow entertainer Bob Hope said it was something like a head falling off Mount Rushmore.
Not yet. You gotta
It's
wait.
hard to
Just had
describe
one.
the power and influence Carson wielded. He could make or break careers. The topics he brought up during his monologue became the topics discussed throughout the country the following day. So today, we're taking a look at the life and career of the man once dubbed the conscience of America. Welcome back to Biographics. I'm your host, Eric Malachite. And today's script was provided by Radu Alexander. So be sure to show them some love as you deploy your likes and do all the things that help keep the eldritch beast that is the YouTube algorithm going. Let's get to it. John William Carson was born on October 23, 1925, in Corning, Iowa, the middle child of Homer Carson and Ruth Hook. He had an older sister named Catherine and a younger brother named Dick. The youngest sibling entered the entertainment business as well and became a television director. Dick Carson helmed shows such as Wheel of Fortune, The Merv Griffin Show, and unsurprisingly, The Tonight Show. He won 5 Emmys for his work, and in any other household that would have made him the undisputed showbiz show-off, but not when his brother was Johnny Carson. For the first years of Johnny's life, the Carson family lived a nomadic lifestyle, always on the move. This was due to Homer Carson's job as a lineman for the phone company. The family traveled to towns such as Red Oak, Clarinda, and Shenandoah, and wherever else new lines were needed. When they moved to Avoca, Iowa in 1930, they stayed put for a few years, and Johnny enjoyed a more traditional childhood. His dad had been promoted to manager of the power company in Avoca, so the family didn't have to move around as much. However, when Johnny was 8 years old, the Carsons did relocate once more, this time leaving Iowa and heading for Norfolk, Nebraska, which is how they pronounce it in Nebraska. We have a Norfolk as well here, but we pronounce it Norfolk. Yeah, dialects are fun. Moving on. With a population of around 10,000 people at the time, Norfolk was like a metropolis compared to all the other small towns Johnny had previously resided in, where the population rarely exceeded 1,000 people. It was a bit intimidating at first, but Johnny soon found his groove. Outdoor activities such as hiking, swimming, and fishing were his favorite pastimes, and, to the annoyance of his neighbors, shooting a BB gun that he got for Christmas one year.
You'll shoot your eye out, kid.
More importantly, Johnny Carson slowly began his transition into his lifelong role as an entertainer. He was profoundly marked by a trip the family took in 1937 to California. They visited Bel Air, and 12-year-old Johnny was left awestruck by the lavish mansions of Hollywood's rich and famous, not knowing that one day, he too would live in a home just like that. At school, Johnny began acting in plays. His first role was that of a bumblebee, and then he acted in A Christmas Carol, playing the role of the boy who goes to buy a turkey for Scrooge. In a later interview, Carson reminisced that it was at this age that he realized just how much he enjoyed the attention he received from being on the stage. He said, "To get attention by being different, by getting up in front of an audience or even a group of kids, and calling the attention to myself by what I did or said or how I acted, and I said, hey, I like that feeling. I think I did that because it was a device to get attention. To get that reaction is a high that I don't think you can get from anything else. And you walk off and you're just, everything is such a high. And it's a great feeling. And that's why many performers have very big highs and very big lows. I know I do." When he was 13, Johnny found a new passion, magic. It was another way for him to perform on stage, but it had the added benefit of focusing all the attention on him instead of having to share it with the rest of the cast. He began practicing around the house, incessantly pestering his siblings and parents to pick a card, any card. Before you knew it, Johnny had developed his new persona of the Great Carsoni and was ready to stage magic shows. Initially, it was just in front of his mother's bridge club, but when he was 14, Johnny gave his first professional performance, earning $3 for a show at
I'm
the
not gonna
local
make it
Rotary
to the fans
Club.
parade,
Can we,
bro.
adjust that for inflation? What is that? Carson went all in on his
Fucking rock.
What
he used the money
the
he
fuck
made to
is
perform
happening?
tricks and crafts from Chicago and New York. He bought a black shirt with a white rabbit on it as his signature look. His mother
Alright,
even
dude,
made him
do
a
your
velvet
shit.
cape with the words "The Great
Do your
Carsoni"
thing, dude.
embroidered in gold. If you want your business to be as legendary as Johnny Carson, then you're going to need a snazzy website.
Okay, what
Sponsored
is
today's
it
video,
doing,
Squarespace
dude?
has you
No,
covered.
I don't. I
Squarespace
didn't
is the
fucking
all-in-one
touch him,
website
bro.
platform
I didn't
for
touch anybody, and you're still using that as an excuse to rampage an NPC on me. Alright, is it gone? Is it gone? No, it's still not gone, dude. What are you doing? Calm down, bro. Calm down.
And it's all thanks to Squarespace's innovative Fluid Engine. The Fluid Engine makes it easier
Where
than
the
ever
fuck
in
is
which
the
anyone can
page
dive
for
in
it?
and make a beautiful website. Answer a few questions about the goals you'd like to accomplish with your site. Choose template and get dragging and dropping elements on your template. Drag and drop technology is also included in every Squarespace.
Why is
But
it so
that's
hard
not
just to
all, because
move?
if you're working
No,
on
my
a
wheels are out.
project like the tabletop RPG I just mentioned, Squarespace makes it easy to create members-only content for your community. Monetize your projects by selling access to online courses, blogs, videos, and memberships. Start with a fully customizable website and earn recurring revenue by gaining your content. Simply set the price and choose whether to charge a one-time fee or subscription for access. And then you can use Squarespace email campaigns. Make it easy for you to spread the word about your project, switch clients, promote your services, and grow your business. Plus, if you're as busy as I am, you can even set up email automations to stay connected, nurture leads, and save time. Ready to get started? Head to squarespace.com/biographics for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, use offer code biographics to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Now,
Man, that's close, bro. Oh, it's all the icons are covering it.
In 1943, 18-year-old Johnny Carson enlisted in the U.S. Navy. He spent most of the war aboard the USS Pennsylvania, where his daily routine typically consisted of mundane matters such as handling ship maintenance and decoding documents. Carson attained the rank of ensign, which was a tricky position to be in. As the lowest rank of commissioned officer in the United States Navy, he wasn't typically seen as a peer by the other officers, but he wasn't one of the boys with the enlisted men either. Fortunately for him, his talents as an entertainer won the others over. Before you knew it, he became the only officer invited to the enlisted men's amateur shows. Carson even added a new skill to his arsenal, ventriloquism. He had a dummy named Eddie, who he would use to make wisecracks about the senior officers and other authority figures, to the delight of the servicemen.
Sir, I know it may finish me as an acting ensign, but
Shut up, Wesley.
Years later, Johnny recalled one of his favorite memories during his Navy days was giving an impromptu magic performance for the U.S. Secretary of the Navy, James Forrestal. One day, Ensign Carson had to deliver a message to him. While making chit-chat, the secretary asked him if he intended to make a career out of the Navy, to which Carson bluntly replied, no. Magic was his passion, and he wanted to make it big as the Great Carsoni. When he heard that, Forrestal requested a special performance on the spot, and Johnny was more than happy to oblige. The rest of Carson's time in the Navy was fairly uneventful, barring one torpedo attack on the USS Pennsylvania in August 1945. After that, it seemed like the ship was destined for combat, but the war ended before that could happen, so Johnny Carson was back home in Nebraska. In the fall of 1945, Johnny enrolled at the University of Nebraska studying journalism. He had some experience writing for his school newspaper, but during his years in the Navy, Carson concluded that talking was way more fun than writing, so he switched majors to radio and speech. 4 years later, he emerged with a bachelor's degree and began working for a radio station in Omaha called WOW. Soon enough, Johnny Carson was Omaha's most promising rising star, and he even got his own show on WOW-TV called The Squirrel's Nest. While this was happening, the Great Carsoni was still active. If anything, the magic gigs were getting bigger and paid well. Johnny even hired a pretty assistant, one of his college classmates named Joe Walcott. The two got hitched in 1949 and stayed married for almost 15 years, the first of 4 marriages for Johnny Carson. Despite the success that Johnny Carson was enjoying in Nebraska, it was one of those big fish in a small pond situations. He had his own morning radio show, afternoon TV show, and plenty of gigs as the Great Carsoni in between them. But Nebraska just wasn't big enough for Johnny's ambitions. He wanted the attention of the entire country. In the early 1950s, Johnny Carson took a big gamble and left Nebraska for California. He had a demo tape of his work, and he was basically going door to door to every radio and TV station, hoping that one of them would give him a shot. No such luck, though. Most of them wouldn't even take a look at his audition, and those who did said thanks, but no thanks. It was one rejection after another, so eventually a humiliated Carson returned to Nebraska with his tail tucked between his legs. For the first time in his professional career, Johnny Carson had experienced failure. There was just one glimmer of hope. While out in LA, he had met a guy named Bill Brennan, who was also from Avoca. The two bonded over their shared roots, and Brennan, who worked for CBS, promised to let Johnny know if any spots opened up. He stayed true to his word, and a few months later, Brennan called him to let him know that there was a staff announcer's position available for a CBS local station called KNXT-TV. It wasn't much, but it was a foot in the door. From there, Johnny began working his way up. He was given a 5-minute radio show called Carson's Corner, but his first legitimate break came in 1952 when he persuaded the television station to give him his own half-hour comedy sketch show titled Carson's Cellar. How did he do that? By doing most of the work himself and doing it for peanuts. He got paid around $25 per episode. Can we adjust that for inflation too? The TV station might have regarded Carson's Cellar as just cheap filler material, but the other comedians didn't. They knew talent when they saw it, and they wanted to work with this promising up up-and-comer. Fred Allen was the first big name to appear on Carson's Cellar. Then came Red Skelton, who offered Johnny a position as a writer on his show, an offer which Carson accepted. More work kept on coming. Carson began making appearances in other CBS shows such as the Colgate Comedy Hour, and in May 1954 he served as host of a new quiz show called Earn Your Vacation. Carson hated that program, and apparently so did everyone else, as it was canned after only 4 months. Johnny's natural talent was helping him rise through the ranks, but fortune also played her hand. One day, on August 18th, 1954, Red Skelton was rehearsing a sketch where he was supposed to break through a prop door. Unfortunately for him, the door didn't cooperate, and Skelton knocked himself out cold. With just 90 minutes to air, the show's producers were frantically searching for a last-minute replacement when somebody suggested Johnny Carson. Johnny was at home when he received the call, and he jumped into his car and rushed to the studio, thinking of jokes for the show along the way. He arrived in time, did the show, and everything went great, much to the relief of the CBS execs, who finally realized that they had something special on their hands with this Johnny Carson guy. And it was time to go primetime. In June 1955, CBS gave Johnny Carson his own show. Simply titled The Johnny Carson Show, it aired every Thursday at 10 p.m. The reviews were middling at best. Words like pleasant, amused, and agreeable were used to describe it, whereas Johnny Carson was labeled a nice guy, reminiscent of a high school valedictorian. Although the show wasn't bad, it wasn't the next big thing in television either. The ratings were also middling, so after 39 weeks, CBS lost faith in its rising star and canceled The Johnny Carson Show. For a while, it seemed like Johnny might be done with television. Out of necessity more than anything else, he went to ABC to host a quiz show titled Do You Trust Your Wife? Later renamed to Who Do You Trust? He even moved from LA to New York City to film it. Initially, Carson saw this as a serious demotion. He went from primetime to daytime television, and he was hosting a quiz again, which he considered lowbrow. But once he settled into his role a bit, Carson realized that Who Do You Trust allowed him to showcase his comedic talents better than the previous shows. There was a lot of back and forth banter between Johnny and his guests. He considered himself a reaction comic, and he got the biggest laughs when he played the straight man to someone else's zany antics. Unfortunately for him, the show's producers made sure to find him plenty of colorful characters to appear on the quiz. And to top it all off, Johnny met his future sidekick, Ed McMahon, who did the narration for the show. Carson ended up hosting Who Do You Trust for 5 years, and he only left in 1962 because he received an offer he couldn't refuse. The success of Who Do You Trust provided Johnny Carson with a wide range of music opportunities, making appearances in other quizzes, talk shows, and variety shows. But even so, he couldn't do Who Do You Trust forever. He had to find something else, eventually. In 1962, NBC extended an offer to him. Since 1954, they had a nightly variety program called The Tonight Show, which itself was based on an even older show called Broadway Open House. Comedian Steve Allen was the original host of The Tonight Show, but he left in 1957 and was succeeded by Jack Barr. After doing the show for 5 years, Barr also decided to move on, so NBC was looking for his replacement. They offered the gig to Johnny Carson, and surprisingly, he said no, feeling that the show was too closely associated with Jack Barr and that he wouldn't be a good fit. NBC decided that come hell or high water, they wanted Johnny Carson, and Johnny Carson was who they were going to get. They told him he could tweak the show to match his style. Hey, give me that pen. Interesting. They were willing to wait half a year until his contract with ABC expired, using guest hosts in the meantime. And to top it all off, there was also a huge salary of $100,000 a year. Can we get the adjusted for inflation numbers up on the screen? That would be great. With all of these incentives, Carson took the deal. October 1st, 1962 saw the premiere of The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. Legendary comedian Groucho Marx was the first person to appear on the show, making the introduction for the new host. Then Johnny walked on stage, cracked a few jokes, and a new era in television began. Other guests that night included Joan Crawford, Rudy Valley, Tony Bennett, and Mel Brooks.
Yogurt the Magnificent!
Please, don't make a fuss. I'm just plain yogurt.
Initially, Carson had to fight an uphill battle. During the months between him and Jack Barr, when the show used guest hosts, the ratings had dipped significantly and the network lost sponsors. If the new version wasn't a hit, it might not survive much longer. But as you already know, such fears proved to be unnecessary. The reviews were in. The New York Times said that the show was off to an attractive start. The format of Tonight remains unchanged, but Mr. Carson's style is his own. Variety reported that the Johnny Carson version of The Tonight Show is heady stuff, and the reviews got even better a few months later, once Johnny firmly settled into his new role. It's almost like you have to give these people time to, find their groove, right?
Send them
right? The ratings lined up with the reviews. That first episode did a massive 40 share, and it wasn't long before The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson was regularly doing greater numbers than the Jack Barr version ever did. The biggest attraction of the new format was undoubtedly Johnny's opening monologue, which has since become standard practice for talk shows. Everyone loved it, except the network. Those 15 minutes were when Johnny Carson was at his most acerbic. The barbs were flying, and they often didn't care who they hit. It was pretty controversial, at least by 1960 standards, especially when Carson made jokes about politicians, a tradition that continues today, like the South Park. Local networks even began cutting out the monologue. Typically, the show was 105 minutes long and ran from 11:15 to 1 a.m. From 11:15 to 11:30, that's when Johnny did his monologue. But some local stations began broadcasting from 11:30. This did not sit well with Carson, who understood that the monologue was the best part of the show. That was the part that everyone talked about the next day, the part that got quoted in newspapers across the country. From the beginning, Carson made it clear to NBC that he wasn't the type to just roll over and do what he was told. When the network refused to force its affiliates to broadcast the show in its entirety, Johnny changed the format. He simply didn't show up for the first 15 minutes, which is really, really funny. That is malicious compliance to a T. Then Johnny Carson walked on stage at 11:30 and he did his monologue so everyone could see it. Obviously, NBC wasn't happy about its star host appearing during the first 15 minutes of his own show, so they reached a compromise. They trimmed the show to 90 minutes, thus giving local affiliates the 11:15 to 12:30 spot without cutting Johnny's monologue. Carson won his first fight with the network, but it would not be the last. By the mid-1960s, The Tonight Show was the highest-earning program on television, generating around $20 million annually from advertising revenue. But more than just a successful show, it had become a career maker. If you were a budding comedian, The Tonight Show was the best opportunity you could find. Particularly if Carson liked you, he would invite you to sit down on the couch after your set, and that's where you knew you made it. Legendary comedians such as George Carlin, Richard Pryor, and Woody Allen launched their careers with appearances on The Tonight Show. And that was just in the 1960s. If anything, the phenomenon only got bigger during the 70s and 80s, with Andy Kaufman, Roseanne Barr, Louis Anderson, Freddie Prinze, Ellen DeGeneres, Stephen Wright, Jim Carrey, Don Rickles, David Letterman, Joan Rivers, Drew Carey, Gary Shandling, and Jerry freaking Seinfeld, just to name a few people who credited their guest spot on Johnny Carson's show as the launchpad for their widely successful careers. Seinfeld even decreed that getting Carson's approval was the holy grail of comedy. At the same time, politicians dreaded the idea of being mentioned on The Tonight Show. They knew that once Johnny Carson decided it was okay to make fun of them, the rest of America would follow. Even the president wasn't safe, and the New York Times once wrote that they knew Richard Nixon was finished once Johnny started making Watergate jokes on his show. And that is fucking amazing. The Los Angeles Herald editor, Rick Dubrow, wrote that Carson unnerves the politicos because of his unpredictability. One political campaign advisor put it more bluntly when he said, "This guy Carson can kill you." Despite the immediate success, Carson and NBC butted heads on multiple occasions. Many network execs resented Carson's influence. In their minds, the show was the star and Johnny Carson was replaceable like any other host. These differences of opinion became most problematic when it was time to negotiate a new contract. The first stalemate happened in 1967 during a strike by the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. To fill the time slot, NBC began airing Tonight Show reruns, but without paying Carson. This caused a rift between the two sides, with Johnny even threatening to quit. NBC decided
I
to
was literally getting an
but when
anxiety
the strike
attack
ended,
trying to
everyone else
find
returned to
control
work
of that mouth.
much better than NBC was prepared to play hardball at first. The network began
Everybody's
looking
saying,
for
"Look,
new hosts, including
everybody's
comedian
screaming."
Bob Newhart and country singer Jimmy Dean.
sensitivity
They even
level
filmed
goes
a few episodes with Dean, but they were a disaster. Not to mention that ABC and CBS were planning to launch their talk shows, anticipating the end of The Tonight Show and looking to fill the void. This put the ball firmly in Johnny's court, so NBC invited him back to the negotiating table with a significantly meeker attitude. Johnny got everything he wanted in his new contract. Not only a hefty raise from $700,000 to $1 million a year, but also complete control over the show, including the ability to hire and fire whoever the hell he wanted. From then on, The Tonight Show truly belonged to Johnny Carson, and he quickly proved that he was worth it. Both CBS and ABC produced competing talk shows, hosted by Merv Griffin and Joey Bishop, respectively. But Carson got better ratings than both of them combined. A second crisis occurred in 1979 when the two sides butted heads again over Carson's later schedule. At that point, he was only doing 3 shows a week, Wednesday through Friday. Monday nights had guest hosts, and Tuesday featured Best of Carson compilations. Unsurprisingly, the new episodes with Johnny always did better in the ratings. But NBC wanted him to go back to 5 nights a week, something which Carson absolutely refused to do. Just like before, he was perfectly willing to walk away from the show. The New York Times even announced his departure in the April 20th edition, but this turned out to be premature. Cooler heads eventually prevailed. Initially, Carson only agreed to stay on for 2 more years, the time left on his contract. And when it finally looked like the end of The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, he announced that he had signed a new contract. Once again, NBC had caved and given Carson what he wanted. This time, it was his own production company, Carson Productions. It mainly produced The Tonight Show, but branched out on occasion. The 1983 comedy drama The Big Chill was probably its biggest outside hit. Outside of The Tonight Show, Carson didn't experience the same kind of success. He made a few bad investments, such as the DeLorean Car Company, and a failed restaurant franchise called Here's Johnny. He had a few public feuds, including with his former protege, Joan Rivers. He went through 3 divorces, and the third one with Joanna Hollard was very costly, public, and messy. And he struggled with a drinking problem throughout his life that resulted in 1 DUI in 1982 and a reputation among his acquaintances as a mean drunk. In fact, staffers at The Tonight Show could tell if Carson was in a good mood or not by what he ordered in the mug he kept on his desk. If it was good, then he asked for tea, coffee, or water. If it was bad, then he wanted a vodka tonic or a scotch and water. Which is the exact opposite of me. If I want a whiskey, I'm having a good time. Despite his failings, Johnny Carson left behind an indelible legacy as the undisputed king of television that will probably never be matched. After 30 years and over 6,700 episodes, he decided it was time to call it quits. His final show took place on May 22nd, 1992, and it was a retrospective episode taped in front of an audience made up of family and friends. Johnny Carson's parting words were, "I bid you a very heartfelt good night." Following his retirement, Carson became an extremely private person who resisted all offers of a comeback and made only a handful of media appearances before his death from emphysema on January 23, 2005, aged 79. He maintained just one indulgence from his previous life, the monologue. Every day, he'd come up with jokes as he read the morning paper. He'd send some to David Letterman, and occasionally, Letterman used them in his monologue. I hope you learned something today, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to deploy your likes, comment a historical figure we haven't covered yet, subscribe, and ring that bell, and share this video with someone who loves learning about history's most important people. I'm Eric Malachite, and we'll see you next time.
Hey folks, David Stewart here. Hope you guys are having a great day. More bored, but more entertained. That's the thesis of this particular video. Or if I'm going to be more specific, bored more frequently, but when we were entertained, we were more entertained. And I'm talking about how things were in the past. So I want you to take a little trip back in time with me, back to the grand old year of 2005. So let's go back in time 20 years. I was a young adult at that
Just
point.
not
Maybe you were a
getting my
kid. Maybe
mouse
you weren't
here,
born
huh?
yet.
How do we
And
scroll
if you
up?
weren't born yet, that's cool. Just
Page up,
take
page
that,
down.
take a little trip back in time, and you'll get a flavor of what life was
Which
like.
page
Because
up? There it is.
modern life was here, but it was missing some things that we have today. The big one, of course, is smartphones. But not just smartphones, but ones connect us to, which is mainly social media. Things like Facebook, Twitter,
Why is it not
TikTok,
zooming out,
YouTube,
dude?
things like that. So when we were going to use the internet, we had to go home and turn on a computer. Or if we were really, hip, we might have a laptop and you might be able to connect to the university Wi-Fi. And I knew people that had their laptops out and were taking notes in class, and that was very cool. But we had all the same stuff. We had cars, we had the internet, we had massively multiplayer online role-playing games, and actually those are a really good example, I think, if you want to take the difference between 2005 and 2025. We had entertainment, we had big blockbuster movies, we had great video games, so 2005 was a great year. It wasn't like we're going back to like 1975 where there's no VHS. You can't watch movies except at the theater or something like that. We had basically all the same stuff. You had digital music. Everything is the same except we don't have phones and we don't have social media. So that actually changes a lot about who we are and how we experience entertainment. The fact is your phone is a really good device, A smartphone is a really good device for a lot of things. It's a camera, it makes phone calls, it text messages people, it has a GPS. Its core functions are really good and really, really useful. We had phones. We could text on them. It just wasn't as fast, right? You'd have like a little number pad that you would have to text on. We could make calls. Instead of GPS, we would print out maps, right? So it was much less convenient than what a phone does. But the main thing is, we didn't have social media and we weren't connected. The only social media at the time was like MySpace, right? But that resulted in us just being more bored. Like the day was more full of boring moments. Whereas the phone now allows you to fill in every little void of your day with some form of entertainment. There's entertainment just waiting at your fingertips. If you need to have a minute of entertainment, you can do a minute of entertainment. You can watch a TikTok video. You can play a little mobile game for 2 or 3 minutes. We can fill our entire day up with this sort of, people call it brain rot now, but this kind of micro entertainment that is really interesting or interesting enough to get rid of boredom for a little while. You're standing in line for food. What do? You whip out your phone and you look at some Twitter posts or something. That's what I tend
really
to
need
do.
something to get
you
me
go to
through
the
my
bathroom,
shift.
you whip your phone out, you play a game, play a potty game,
Dog, I got
whatever you're going
quality
to play.
shit right here.
And that makes us feel less bored throughout the day. But
Damn, boy,
I think
you're
it makes
looking
us
good.
less able to go deep
right.
on the entertainment that we would actually like to. So those of us who remember 2005. Games were better in 2005 for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons that games were better in 2005 is that we were better. Like, we were better at games, and we had a better relationship with games. We had a healthier relationship with games, and that, I think, reflexively has affected game design as time has gone on as well. I can't think of a better example, actually, than World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft was around in 2005. In fact, I think the best version of the game, even today, if you were to play it today, is the version from 2005. It's the classic version of the game. So if you're playing the classic, no expansions, patch 1.12, that's like the best version of the game to pick up and play if you've never played the game before. I still believe that, having played all the different versions of the game now and played classic, gone back to classic. But if you were playing it in 2005, it would be so much better than it is today because there weren't smartphones. Because the internet wasn't as easy to get a hold of, because there wasn't social media, because there was no streaming. None of that stuff existed. Someone might use Fraps to like record some footage and edit it with Windows Movie Maker and put it up, not on YouTube, because people didn't even know what YouTube was even after it took a while for us to even know what YouTube was. Put it on like a file sharing site, and then you could download it. You could know about it on your guild forums and download it. It was all very primitive. But the game was there. And it was better because everybody playing the game was different than they are today. You got a much deeper experience, and you arranged your time, you arranged your mindset in order to allow yourself to have that deeper experience. Vanilla WoW was a lot slower than retail WoW is, or any modern MMO. Compare this to Final Fantasy 14, or anything that you know, right? Elder Scrolls Online, or Black Desert, or any kind of new game that you want to think of. It's like it's way slower, but if you compare it to the retail, it's way slower. So you walk out, you decide you're going to kill a monster, you start using your attacks. You're going to auto attack a lot because you have limited resources, whether it's rage or mana or something. You have to manage that, and so after you kill the monster, you usually have to sit down and eat or drink to refill your mana and your health. Pull another monster. If you pull 2 monsters, you're going to have a really hard time. And if you pull multiple mobs, or you walk through and you pull 3 mobs, you'll die, right? So it's this really a game where the world is really dangerous, and you have to be very careful about everything that you're killing and managing the world, and knowing to have food in your bags and stuff like that. So the game is a lot slower. It takes a lot longer to kill things. There was no flying mounts, so you had to walk everywhere. Even getting an epic mount cost 1,000 gold, which was a lot of gold back then, and most people couldn't get their epic mount because they didn't play enough. They didn't go and grind enough with the game in order to get 1,000 gold. So the game was a lot slower, but it was a much deeper experience because while you're pulling those mobs, while you're having to think about the world, it's a lot compared to the new version. There's just a lot more going on because the new version, you can really just face roll through the leveling content and just be mentally dead and pull 30 mobs at a time and kill them. You feel very powerful. It feels stimulating because you're pressing buttons very often. The game is set up now to where every single global cooldown, every like 1.5 seconds or whatever the global cooldown is. I forgot now, but you know, you're pressing a button every single time, and that wasn't the case in vanilla. And in fact, if you did that, you'd hear your character say over and over again, "Not enough rage," whatever it was. So it was a completely different kind of game to play in that regard. Now it's very stimulating, very fast. You feel very powerful. You're killing things. You're getting new items all the time. You were very rarely getting new items in vanilla. Even when you were leveling up, it's like occasionally a green would drop, and it would be random enchantment, probably something bad. You didn't get it here, okay? So you might disenchant it or sell it to someone or give it to your friend or something. And now, you're always getting better gear, and the gear is completely leveled out, right? It's like, I got a green. Oh, it's like of the whale, which is like spirit and strength or something. I don't know.
The choice of the professional.
But now you don't have to worry about any of that. It's like higher item level tells you the item level now equals better. So if it's higher item level, you just put it on. You just don't have to think. So the game is just constantly stimulating you the way that your phone does. So modern WoW is competing with your phone. So it's got to be hyperactive. Classic WoW was competing with doing the dishes. So it didn't have to be as stimulating. It could be slower, but it was also deeper because while you're doing that, while you're having to do a lot of thinking about how you're going to manage your time in the game, you're also admiring the scenery. You're chatting with your friends, right? While you're sitting there drinking, you're typing in guild chat, you're typing back, you're having all of these conversations. It's more social as a result because there's more of that downtime, those little moments of boredom. I can imagine a modern player being bored, like I have to stop and eat. What do I fill this time with? And pulling their phone out to like do something while their character's eating. And if you go back to EverQuest, it's like EverQuest had a lot more of that downtime. WoW's downtime was pretty small by comparison. But those older games like EverQuest and Dark Age of Camelot or stuff like that, it was a slower experience because it was about the depth of the world and the depth of the systems and a dangerous world and friends. And if you had a party of 5 people, then you could face roll through those mobs, but you had to spend time to organize those parties, get those people together to go out and level and do the things that you wanted to do. You had to organize your own parties to go to dungeons and things like that. Versus the modern one, it's like, I want to do a dungeon. Press the button, it puts me in the queue, and boom, I'm in the dungeon. Same thing with Final Fantasy 14. It's like the auto queue system is so It's just so stimulating. It's so quick. Everything's so fast. And when you talk about these things made classic better, people are like, are you trying to slow down the game? Like, it's a terrible idea to slow the game down. But as I think about that, one of the reasons that I stopped playing classic WoW is I realized I just wasn't going to have the time to play it at the level that I wanted to play it at, which would be like raid. I just wasn't going to have 4 to 8 hours a week to commit to raiding. My life is too busy. I have too many obligations. I have children. I'm really glad that other people got to experience that. Really happy that other people got to maybe go back and experience the fun of a big raiding guild. Not quite like what it was in 2015 or 2005 because we're different people. But back in 2005, we really had more time. We had more time to play, and we had our schedules. We were better able to clear our schedules and just focus on something fun, whether that was going to be like practicing guitar or if it was going to be just something purely for fun, like World of Warcraft or, I have a nostalgia for turning on the PS2 and that PS2 sound because that meant you were going to spend an hour or two playing a game. And now a lot of our gaming experiences, I saw like most kids are playing games on their phone or their tablet. They're these small bites of fast food rather than like a good meal that develops and takes time to appreciate, which is what games were before. The beauty of old consoles that weren't online, like the PS2, was that you got a distraction-free experience. When you turned on that console and you started playing, everything else was gone. There was no school, there was no work, right? None of that stuff. In 2005, I was an adult. And so I know this wasn't just me being a high school kid, right? Like can have some nostalgia for the 90s. And I had this in my book, Afterglow Generation Y, which I have it right here, but you can check it out. I have a lot of nostalgic stories. And the first scene of the book is an aphorism of somebody going home on a hot day and playing like PlayStation. Alone in a dark room with the air conditioner on.
Yeah, I don't know where the gas station is, dude. It's
great
weird how it just
you were so
disappears
bored
on
in
you,
school.
dude.
You had all of those gaps in school.
You think it's
to go
great?
home,
Wow.
your brain was really primed and ready to have
a lot of cops, bro,
and really good entertaining experience, rather than a bunch of like little pieces of brain rot.
Yeah, where the hell is that gas
TikTok
station?
stuff, right?
The flowers.
You were ready to have that deep experience, to turn on the PlayStation and play Final Fantasy IX for 2 or 3 hours, and put off doing the dishes.
Yeah, I see.
And we did that with World of Warcraft. Things started to change slowly over time, and eventually I think
you're gonna mark
have
a
lost
book?
the ability to have those same deep experiences. We don't schedule our life the same. Our obligations follow us in through the front door. I used to work, in 2005 I was working, I worked several jobs in 2005.
It's not this, I feel like it's the street, but it's not the street.
I taught lessons, I was a music teacher, I think in 2005. I think that was my first year as like an elementary school music teacher, and the next year, 2006, I was teaching a couple of colleges. So
I can't take this anymore. You put a cop right in fucking front of me, right?
4 nights a week. I was really busy. I was practicing hours and hours every day. My life was really
literally,
full, and yet I still had time for these deep gaming experiences. I still found time multiple nights a week to sit down and just play World of Warcraft for a couple of hours. Even just leveling an hour or two, I could just do that. It's just a joy to be able to do that. It was such a joy to turn on a console and play a game. I remember when Twilight Princess came out around the time of it was such a joy to like turn it on and play a game and not be thinking about work. Like work wasn't following me in my pocket. I wasn't having to field emails, right? I got emails from students and stuff, but that was on the computer. It was in a totally different room, and no one expected you to answer your email or answer a message immediately. That the culture didn't expect you to be plugged in all the time. The way that they do now. So we had different expectations on us. We were better able to do that. I could watch movies. Now it's like, I'm not joking when I say it's really hard for me to find 2 hours to watch a movie because I really rarely have a 2-hour block of time where I can just do a thing. Like, I would love to sit down and watch something like Lord of the Rings more often, and Lord of the Rings was a movie that came out in the early 2000s. those movies came out. Those were early 2000s movies, and they're some of the best movies that you can watch. You know, we had the Star Wars prequels. We were really spoiled for like great blockbuster movies. But now it's like finding 2 hours to watch a movie is hard because I have so many other demands and so many little things like social media and stuff. If I make a list, if I allow it, like social media, I can completely lose my day trying to do the social media game. Like, let me post on Twitter and try to get retweets and try to get that dopamine hit from people paying attention to me. Maybe make a little money, right? Maybe promote my book or something. Whatever book I have going on. King Leprosot. You should read it. It's great.
What's gonna pop in, dude?
You can lose 2 hours doing that, and then you're like, you're at the time limit. Did I enjoy those 2 hours? So the question,
I
and
can't
should have
find the
started with
fucking
this
gas
question.
station, bro. I don't know. I can't find the
If you remember
fucking gas
2005,
station that
were you
in my
more or
mind
less
is.
bored? And were you more
It's
or
got to
less
be the
entertained?
repetitive architecture.
It seems like
dude.
those things can't go together, but we were
So your
more
mind,
bored,
just
but we
it's
were
not
also
right
more
here.
bored.
It's not where you're thinking.
Because we were able
It's
to
crazy.
experience
It's
that
crazy,
entertainment
dude.
and a deeper level and be more
I
attentive
feel
to
like
it.
it's right here
Really be an
somewhere, but
experience that overwhelmed us.
it's not.
How many
dude.
times in today, in 2025, are you watching a good movie, a movie that you know is good, and you feel the temptation to check? I know I'll just see what's going on Twitter. I'll just see how that tweet's doing. I hit tweet. Maybe it got some more reposts. Maybe I got some cool responses. Let's see how that video is
I'm
doing.
pretty sure.
You know. Do you feel it? I mean, I feel it. And partly because social media is part of my business, it's particularly susceptible to it. So I said this in another video. One of the things I did when I got back from my trip was I just did Twitter on an alt. And that got rid of all the need to post because no one's watching. No one cares that I'm posting on the poo-poo post alt, right? No one cares on the banta fodder. It's like poo-poo post, whatever. That's right. No one cares that I'm posting on it. No one's watching. No one's retweeting. No one gives a crap. So that eliminates the feeling of like, maybe if I post this, I'll get attention. It just gets rid of that. And what I want to do going forward is I want to train myself to use my phone in much more appropriate and intentional ways. And that means subjecting myself more to boredom, right? To those little moments of boredom that come up in the day. And finding better ways to fill those in. I've gone over this before. Like, I found lots of ways to fill in those moments in 2005 that were only slightly less efficient than 2025, right? I had a DS. I could pull up my DS if I had 10 minutes, like between classes or something, and just hop right into a game and play for 5 or 10 minutes and then close it up and pull it back up, you know? So you could get a Nintendo DS and they're better games than what you have on your mobile phone. You could get a PS Vita for pretty cheap, a lot less than a phone, and the games are better. You could get a 3DS, the games are better, okay? Even though they're old now, 2012 or whatever, for the PS Vita. I don't remember when the 3DS came out, maybe 2011. These are old games. But old games that are complete. They're just better experiences. They're deeper experiences, and you can still have a bite-sized yet deeper experience with that. So I think back on that as like, yeah, the gaming experience is better. I loved handheld gaming because I was so busy, but I still got to do have all of these experiences that were great. I carried books around and I read books, and that's something you can do with your phone. You can read a Kindle book, right? You can buy one of my books and read it on your phone. There's lots of ways that you can fill in that time with things that aren't social media that make you feel like at the end of the day, I wasn't bored, but was I entertained? Do I feel good about what I saw or did? Right? I almost never feel that. But when I stop and I like watch a movie with my son, even half a movie if we only have an hour, I feel so much better about that time. And I pick up so much more and I enjoy it so much more. And it's just so much better. I would much rather sit down and play a console game with my son for an hour than like look at Twitter. But the tendency is to look at Twitter because there's no friction to that. Like, we have to figure out ways to put friction in our phone. Delete the app off your phone. That's an easy way. Right? Have your screen time widget on your phone to remind you. Don't be looking at your phone. Yeah, you might need your phone for GPS. Another thing is
Mom
your
sit
phone, and I've
down,
done this before,
figure
take the
out
phone
what's
out of the
going on.
pocket, put it in another place, and you have, like I have a smartwatch, and so if someone texts me, it pops up on the
Sorry,
smartwatch.
but yeah, give me 1
so I'm not
minute here.
disconnected. If someone calls me, I can take the call. But I won't get there, you know, I'm a little bored waiting for the kids to do a task, like they're cutting out paper or something. I could check Twitter. Like, I wonder if they're, I thought of a joke I could post. Like, no one's listening.
Yeah,
I don't need
she's
to do
been
that.
working on that. That's just right.
I need to get the phone out. So, anyway, that's my whole thing. Think about 2005. Were you more entertained, but more bored as well? I think I was, for sure. And I think that goes a lot to why I think gaming really peaked in around 2007, because we were still having these deep and good experiences with games. They're not gone, right? There's still great games that come out that give deep experiences. Baldur's Gate was one. Expedition 33 was one. These were good games that I think gave people a really much deeper experience, like what they felt like a game should be, rather than like a mobile game, right? Most of our console games are actually pretty deep experiences by comparison, but there's all kinds of weird little time-wasting shallow things that get stuck into our games, little Ubisoft towers and that kind of stuff, which that's a whole nother video to talk about that stuff. Those experiences are still out there, but we have to be the people that are able to fully get the most out of those, and also we have to be the people that can get the most out of those by scheduling time to do them. You know, it's really easy to just burden yourself with 1,000 little tasks and never do anything that's fun or engaging, and kind of rely on the few minutes of anti-boredom content instead of really
it does. It just like reading. You can feel it. It's like
good entertainment. Okay, so
like
anyway, leave me your thoughts down below.
Fighting the mates on all the agents that are coming out. Yeah, you can
just
feel
as
it.
a heads up, a little bit.
It totally pulls you out of the
Discord
experience.
server's going away. For the reasons that I talked about, is that
it becomes a different
when I'm on my
experience,
computer. I'm rarely on my computer now because I'm way more focused on my children. So I'm usually away from my computer, which was
how do you like
in
Stardew Valley, baby?
My ability to access
Yeah.
certain kinds of media. Like I can get really overwhelmed with Discord notifications. So like my notifications are off, and I would just check it on my computer. I'm just not able to give any value with my Discord.
And just rummage through all their stuff. Yeah.
As much as I want to, and I'd rather just.
It's kind of rude.
Talk to people in the comments section.
I'm just saying.
You know, that's more fun to me. So I'm going to get rid of the Discord server because I don't feel like it's.
Oh yeah, you can just rummage through everybody's stuff
and you
take
can still
whatever you want.
You can still get the free books.
Just go through,
and,
take what you
copies
want.
of live rights or any live music.
Yeah, nobody notices.
Of the ambient music that you can listen to, so that kind of stuff.
Watch out for the red barrels
on Patreon for you guys. So that's it. I appreciate it. King Leopard is out. Find a link down below. If you read it and enjoyed it, please do leave a review because it helps me out long term to sell the book on Amazon.
I don't think
I will see you all next time. Have a great
day. You got
day.
everything ready. Yep. Yeah, and then you looked in the closet. You went through your stuff. Said, "Yeah, I'll be good."
I think you're thinking about yesterday.
Okay.
So, I mean, I guess it might be an obvious question, but what is with the fascination of the Lord's return?
Well, I mean, it's something that he promised to do. It's also a mysterious oracle. It comes from the lips of our Lord in the form of a prophecy. It's his last discourse. Generally, we find it in Matthew 23, 24, and 25. We call it the Olivet Discourse because he gave it on the Mount of Olives. And it really is, it stands in stark contrast to the Sermon on the Mount, the first of the 5 sermons that he gives in Matthew. In fact, I shouldn't do this, but I'll advertise.
Do it.
Yeah, the Emmaus Academy with the St. Paul Center has a course that I just taught, a really brief summary of the Gospel of Matthew, where I divided up into the 5 sermons. The Sermon on the Mount from chapters 5 to 7, and the Sermon on the Mount of Olives, chapters 23, 24, and 25. And then there are 3 one-chapter sermons. There's the mission discourse in Matthew 10. There is the parables, the 7 parables in Matthew 13. And then there is what is called the church discourse in Matthew 18.
Real quick,
touch upon those.
How do people get access to that? St. Paul Center, what's the URL?
stpaulcenter.com.
And they can just sign up. And I personally would love to do that, to go through those videos. Yeah.
I don't know if it's behind a paywall. I hope it's not. But in any case, I hope it's worth it.
Sure it's worth it, yeah.
But the Olivet Discourse is really a strong message, because he talks about not one stone be left upon another. All of the blood, the innocent blood of the martyrs will be required of this generation, and this generation will not pass away before all my words take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. And so it's an ominous announcement of destruction and judgment upon the old covenant in general, the old Jerusalem in particular, and the old priesthood with the animal sacrifices. And it culminates in Matthew 25. And so you're left wondering, won't that leave a terrible vacuum? No covenant, no Jerusalem, no temple, no priesthood, no sacrifices. What about the feast, the pilgrimages? You know, it's just going to be all washed away in a great tsunami. And then in the next chapter, the very next thing Matthew narrates is the institution of the Eucharist, the new covenant, the new priesthood, the new sacrifice. And so it's not elaborate like it had been. You know, as St. Augustine would say of the Blessed Sacrament and all of the sacraments.
I just want to take my girlfriend out.
They're not merely symbolic, they're powerful, and they're much simpler. You compare, baptism with circumcision, for example. And so there is something going on in Jesus' public ministry as it reaches this denouement that is oracular. He's giving a prophecy. And so often you think that prophecy is merely predicting the future. And we have some prophets, who prophesy like that. Isaiah 7:14, a virgin shall conceive. But generally speaking, prophetic oracles are
holding
mysteries,
down the mouse and trying to
and they're not
find
just
movements on
subject
it
to
at the
human
same time.
interpretation,
It's
as
probably
we
not
read in
the
2
best.
Peter 1:19, that no prophecy is a matter of one's own private interpretation.
Yeah, you're
because
pressing
prophecies,
down on the mouse
are
button
wrapped
while
in
you're
mystery.
trying to do
Plus,
a fine
another
movement
point
with
that
it.
St.
That
Augustine
is
has
like
taught me, and
two
Aquinas,
opposite
Aquinas
fucking
as well,
things, dude.
that Scripture is not just a big
No, you're
book that
pressing
contains
down
several
on
sections,
something while trying
one of
to
which
move
is
it.
called the
Like,
prophets.
that is just
Inspiration doesn't just render the
ouch. It
Bible
gets hard, dude,
inerrant.
especially when you're
Presumably,
trying to
there
move
are other books that have no error, but inspiration basically produces
Yeah,
a
it's
result
funny.
that
Before
all of
you go
Scripture
in,
is
you
prophecy.
gotta turn all the noise
That
off.
all of Scripture has dual
No, it's
authorship.
just it all builds
And
up.
the human
and it
writers
just
are
makes
not
you
just
great.
stenographers,
It's a weird
secretaries
thing.
taking dictation,
Come here,
but
come
they
here, come here,
are
come here. Okay, dude.
they are
Come here, come here,
contemplatives.
come here. Ah, thank you. Woo! No, it's funny how it just builds up, builds up, builds up, builds up, and it's just drilling in the back of your head. Right. Yeah, no, you're holding down on the mouse and you're trying to move it at the same time. It's just that's when you want to let up a little, you know what I mean? But you're pushing down on it. Yeah, it's just wow. Okay. So but yeah, they really want to make me go buy a fucking Microsoft. Not just a controller. I have to buy a Microsoft controller, an Xbox controller. One I don't need. Just for the PC. Hey.
I'm gonna remove your ugly face, fool. I smoke cause it gives me. Who's gonna die?
Yeah, that's why you just end up in those MMOs. People just end up sitting there. Like, you want to be in the game, but it just gets so, every time you move, it's so hostile. Every aggro. The entire game is just so aggro. It makes it unenjoyable to be in it. See, now my girlfriend's not at home again. God, dude.
Oh, super long hair.
Now I don't have my flowers that I wanted for her.
In darkness,
Go back to the flowers. So sensitive. It's almost impossible to land the mouse wheel where you want it when you're changing things. Selecting. It's almost impossible. I don't know why, but it is. I've tried to adjust that. I can't find it. Flowers. Get some body armor. Whoa.
How you not see me?
Oh, dude, I just... It's become unenjoyable, dude. Literally. Wow.
OG coming through.
You've got to be kidding me.
Yeah, it's on now, punk. Come on, Bing, got move. Damn, they got their cap peeled.
I have a piece for every occasion. Perfect for killing, pure and simple.
Film Festival with free screenings of the documentary Red Dawn. Ammunition, protecting your rights. God, I sound like hot shit on that commercial. Feeling nervous? Welcome to Ammunition. Don't forget the Ammunition Endangered Species Barbecue.
Take it,
each
hold it,
Saturday.
love it.
Protect your home with our Vaporize Intruders miniature nuclear bomb. Ammunition loves women too. For the female sports enthusiast or self-defense practitioner with big breasts, get 2
I didn't sell you this, right?
T-shirt that says you're about to get a good look at my other 44s. Ladies, tired of whistling construction workers? Next time, whistle back with a high-velocity rifle that'll splatter his brains all over the
The
building.
wars are coming, you hear?
The ability to defend yourself, whatever the cost. Welcome to Ammunition. You've made the smartest decision of your life. You've come to a gun shop. We hope you get everything you need to feel real manly and patriotic. Don't forget to check out our selection of landmines. They're the gift that keeps on giving year after year. Mother-in-law being a bitch? Ammunition.
Man, I'm fitting a nut up in a minute. Cool, baby, cool. Hey, give me that paper. All right, man, so I'll be seeing you about half an hour, I guess.
Easy. What's going on over there? I think my ribs are ready. All right.
That's mine.
I don't need this shit. Here.
Family's home, better recognize. Hey, man, pass the joint. Shit, fool, you just got jacked. me!
When you guys get back from taking Bubs to work.
I'm crazy for...
All right, folks, you about ready to go? Hey.
What's poppin', girl?
I'm hungry. Let's eat.
No bother, bitch. Hey, watch it, homie. What's this shit you drink? Give me some dap, homie.
Take your long hair with you.
Get the hell on, man!
Hello.
The hagiographers, the sacred writers, are men of prayer, but they're also given a charism of prophecy. So they're able to predict, but not just simply, connecting dots the way we do at the end of the year. Who do you think will be divorced in Hollywood in the coming year? Or who do you think the next pope will be, the next president?
Okay.
There's a predictive element, but there is so much more than that. Cardinal Danielou once said that prophecy is the typological interpretation of history.
Hallow is the #1 prayer app. Why haven't you got it yet? Download it right now. Go to hallow.com/mattfrag.
And that, to me, nails it. It shows why does Jesus not only prophesy the end of the Old Covenant, Jerusalem, the temple, the Levitical priesthood, and other sacrifices, but he does it in an oracle that is layered with all of these quotations, citations, allusions, and intertextual echoes from the law and the prophets and the Psalms, but especially Isaiah and Ezekiel and Daniel and others. So you cannot understand the new apart from the old. You can't understand what Jesus is doing apart from his pledge to fulfill the law and the prophets, not abolish. But it isn't simply restoring the way it was back in the golden age of David and Solomon. No, I mean, there really is a death and resurrection of the old covenant. The old Jerusalem becomes the new. The sacrifice of the lamb becomes Eucharistic. Ultimately, what the apocalypse is filled with is not only the imagery of fulfillment, but also liturgical imagery more than any other book that somebody might call apocalyptic. And so when you have your antenna up and you're listening closely for this, okay, you realize that the new doesn't abolish the old any more than, say, the butterfly abolishes the caterpillar. There is a metamorphosis, quite literally. That's the word for transfiguration. So the new is in continuity with the old, but the analogy works in such a way that there's even greater discontinuity between the new and the old, between the heaven and the earth, between the new Adam and the old. And so you begin to get a sense with his death and resurrection and ascension that not only has heaven been affected by Jesus' offering, but heaven has been effectively repopulated with the martyrs and the saints and all of these people, the 144,000 from every one of the 12 tribes in Revelation 7, plus this vast number that no one can. But it's not just the end of time that it's going to be filled with all of these people. It's really in the fullness of time. And so when we read about Jesus' ascension, it's not just like a smooth or safe getaway. He's taking captivity captive, as Paul says in Ephesians, referring to Psalm 68. And so the descent into Hades, I love to ponder this, especially in the aftermath of Easter. We always emphasize Holy Thursday, Good Friday. You skip a day, then Easter Sunday. But Holy Saturday was a Sabbath, a high Sabbath. And when Jesus is laid to rest, there is a sense in which his humanity, his mortal frame, is separated from his soul. But at the same time, it's forever united to divinity.
Thanks very much for watching that clip. You can click the link below if you want to watch the full interview, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
Themselves in India, especially in the city of Goa. but also briefly in Japan, as well as very successful missions in Central and South America, among other places. They were active in social work, interacting with kings, living in the world, and participating in the culture. Hence, we have many stories. In April of 2025, Pope Francis passed away after a decade of serving as the Bishop of Rome and leader for the Catholic Church. He was a colorful, sometimes divisive pope, and one that was generally liked by at least a lot of people worldwide. There are many things that were unique about him and his tenure, but one of the central ones is that it was the first ever Jesuit pope. Indeed, his election in 2013 was a quite shocking historical event when the first ever member of the Jesuit order took on this position. But who are the Jesuits? What is their history? And why was it so special or unique that one of them was elected as the Pope? Before we get into it, I just want to mention and do some shameless self-promotion, as I do sometimes. Many of you know that I'm a musician as well, and I make music, and I release music, and I'm actually putting out a new song again, a single with my project Zini called Tasting. It's coming out on September 5th. It's a song that's quite rock-oriented, with influences from Middle Eastern music and Middle Eastern instruments, as is often the case with me. So I would highly appreciate it if you wanted to check the song out and let me know what you think. It's on all the streaming platforms, granted that you're watching this after September 5th. So you can find it in my link tree in the description. If you're watching before September 5th, there's probably a link to the pre-save in the description, so you can make sure that you know when it's coming out. Again, I would really like for you to let me know what you think and to check it out, and if you like it, then share it with your friends and so on. That's all. Thanks so much. The Jesuits, also known as the Society of Jesus, is one of the major religious orders and institutions within the Catholic Church, one that has had a huge influence not only within Catholicism, but also on culture, literature, science, and education more generally in the world. Compared to some of the other famous Catholic orders like the Dominicans, the Franciscans, and Cistercians, the Jesuits came on the scene quite late in history, as late as the 16th century, but nonetheless very quickly proved themselves to be very popular and influential. The founding of the order is traced to the Spanish figure St. Ignatius of Loyola, a priest, theologian, and mystic with a very interesting life story. He was born as Inigo in the Basque region of northern Spain to a family of nobility. And the first chapter of his life very much sees him follow the expected life of nobility. He was inspired by the stories of great knights and heroes, and thus he joined the army as a 17-year-old. The hagiographies, of course, claim that he was quite full of pride and vanity in several ways, and his successful military career was a reflection of this. But in 1521, at age 30, Inigo had a terrible accident. When out in a battle against the French, he was hit by a cannonball straight to his legs, which left him severely injured on his right leg. He had to go through several surgeries, all without any anesthesia at the time, which sounds quite rough. His bones basically had to be taken apart and then put back together during these surgeries. It sounds like a very, very unpleasant experience, and it obviously was. And even though he obviously survived, which is nice, it still left him with a limp for the rest of his life. But needless to say, this of course meant that Inigo had quite a long period of recovery ahead of him. But it is in this period of recovery, when he was basically confined to his bed for a very long time, very bored, that his religious turn, his religious conversion, so to say, actually took place. Recovering from his injury was a very boring experience, and Inigo didn't have access to any of the books and stories about knights and chivalry that he loved so much. Instead, he had to make do with what was available, which in this case was the life of the saints and the life of Jesus by Ludolf of Saxony. Reading the stories about the deeds of the great saints really inspired him, much more so in some ways than the stories about the knights and heroes of old, and this eventually led him to make the decision to dedicate his life completely to God. It is from this point that his life as a person of the Church really starts. He initially visits the monastery at Santa Maria de Montserrat, but then goes on an extended stay in the town of Manresa in Catalonia. Here, he basically shuts himself off from the world and dedicates himself to rather extreme forms of asceticism and mortification of the flesh, a phase that lasted for about a year of his life. And even though he eventually decided to abandon this extreme practice and live a more moderate life from then on, it's probably in this period of intense practice that he would lay the groundwork for his most famous literary work, The Spiritual Exercises. Inigo then goes on a brief pilgrimage to the Holy Land, but then returns to Europe to commence his formal studies, first in Barcelona and then eventually in the prestigious and important University of Paris, where he becomes proficient in theology, Latin, philosophy, and the subjects that were expected of an official in the church. It is during his studies that he started going by the name Ignatius, which is now what most people know him by, and it is also during his period of study that he meets and becomes good friends with the people who would be very important for his historical legacy. These schoolmates of his included people like Peter Faber, Francis Xavier, and the figures who would basically make up the founding fathers of the soon-to-be Jesuit order. Because indeed, the gang of friends would soon have larger ambitions. They had been preaching a lot in the streets of Paris and in Spain, and would meet regularly to discuss plans and strategies for further preaching of the Christian faith. This included a vow they took in 1534 to go to the Holy Land together for a period. However, unfortunately, this actually never came to fruition due to the uneasy political circumstances in the region. While they waited for a better opportunity, they offered themselves to the Pope to do whatever he sought fit for their ministry. But it soon became clear that the trip to the Holy Land probably wasn't going to happen at all, and instead they turned to the idea of starting a new religious order altogether. In 1539, they all gathered in Rome to discuss the formation of this order, to write a formula that described what it was to be, and then to appeal to the Holy See for approval. This approval of the order came in 1540 from Pope Paul III, thus marking the official foundation of the new order, which went under the name the Society of Jesus. This was quite an unusual name. I mean, most of the orders, like the Dominicans and so on, they were named after the founders or foundational figures of those orders. So the Dominicans were named after St. Dominic, the Franciscans after Francis of Assisi, and so on. The Jesuits, however, were named after Jesus himself, which is quite a departure in that tradition, and this was actually quite a controversy, and something that a lot of people criticized them for. They thought that naming this order after Jesus in such a way was quite self-aggrandizing in a certain way compared to other orders. In any case, with the official founding of the order, Ignatius was named the first superior general, which he remained until his death in 1556. But before then, he had already led the order into some major activities, managed to spread it and establish the basic features and practices. This he did by writing works like the Constitutions, which became the basis for Jesuit rules, principles, and priorities for the rest of history. He also composed, as we saw, the so-called Spiritual Exercises, a book aimed at a more personal and complex regimen of spiritual practice that would lead to experiencing the grace of God directly, even in a kind of mystical sense. This work has also been very central for the practices of individual Jesuits across history. But now that the Society of Jesus was actually founded and established, what were these principles more precisely? What characterized the Jesuit order and their activities, and also compared to other similar orders? Well, anyone who has just a tiny bit of familiarity with the Jesuits will know at least one aspect that they are famous for, which is their missionary activity. And this is indeed one of the most central characteristics and principles of the order. They were insanely active missionaries and very successful missionaries from the very beginning, basically very quickly spreading to many new corners of the world to spread the Christian faith. We see this, for example, in the life of one of the most famous and founding Jesuits, the aforementioned Francis Xavier, who went on a long and dramatic missionary journey to Asia, first to Goa in India, but eventually leading the very first mission to Japan, where he was also quite successful. We'll return to the story of the Jesuits in Japan a bit later on. Xavier then also planned to carry on the mission to China, but sadly passed away before he properly got there. Another very famous aspect of the Jesuits is, of course, their relationship with the Pope. And while there has certainly been a lot of conspiratory interpretations of this, as well as many misunderstandings and misrepresentations, it is certainly true that there is a close and special relationship here. We saw before that even before the order was officially recognized, they had made a kind of vow to follow the orders of the Pope. And as they were recognized, and when they composed the formula and the constitutions, this relationship was made official. On a practical level, what this actually meant was that the Jesuits made a vow to be missionaries, and since the Pope is effectively the one who gives orders on where and when and how missions are to be sent and conducted, this of course connects them with the Pope and the papacy in a very significant way. It is not, however, as John W. O'Malley points out, a, quote, vow of loyalty to the Pope as such, but as many have misleadingly interpreted it. The structure and strategy of the order, as summarized in the constitutions, was quite distinctive and unique compared to other religious orders, and in several different ways. For one thing, it argues to a much more significant degree for the compatibility of Christianity with quote-unquote secular culture, and this would impact Jesuit activities a lot historically. Indeed, the main strategy of missionary work carried out by them was through education, by building schools all around Europe and the world where they would teach not only fellow Jesuits or even Catholics, but students of all walks of life and denominational adherence. Because of their openness to quote-unquote secular culture, the Jesuits and their schools were often directly involved with and interested in things like theater, producing plays, music, studying the old classics of Greece, literature, building observatories to carry out astronomical calculations, and much else.
You think CJ a bitch,
These school activities were unique in several ways. As I mentioned, they were open to lay people and were tuition free, so that anyone, regardless of economic position or class, could enroll. The Jesuits thus became schoolmasters, dedicated to education in various fields, and became very good at it too.
Oh yeah?
The wide scope of their education, including secular fields and science, meant that Jesuit schools became a training ground for important historical figures in these vast different fields. In other words, the Jesuits contributed significantly to the way education works today, and would also produce some significant scientists and cultural figures historically. Speaking of the world of theater, John O'Malley points out, theater had by then become a distinguishing mark of Jesuit schools and was considered by the Jesuits an essential component in their educational program. It taught poise and put eloquence, the mark of a leader in society, into practice. It sparked enthusiasm in the students and rescued them, at least for a while, from the drudgery of the classroom. Even schools of modest size generally produce 2 or 3 plays annually, which further anchor the institution as an essential element of the cultural life of the city. The limitations of school drama are well known, but to put it into perspective, we need to recall that Lope de Vega, Calderon, Andreas Griffius, Jacob Binderman, Corneille, and Molière received their first training in theater in Jesuit schools. And in the wider field of art, he says, as Baroque culture developed, the society became ever more identified with some of its leading artists. Gian Lorenzo Bernini, a friend of the Superior General, Gian Paolo Oliva, designed for the Jesuits the new church in Rome of Sant'Andrea al Quirinale, completed in 1671, one of the gems of Baroque architecture. Oliva, at the urging of Bernini, meanwhile engaged Giovanni Battista Gauli, known as Baciccio, to decorate the interior of the Jesuits' mother church, the Jesuit, and gave it the form it retains to this day. But as we said, the purpose of these schools was, in the end, to serve in their missionary activities. And it is really here, again, that the core story of the Jesuits takes place. They would open up these kinds of schools all over the world. Aside from Europe, they quickly established themselves in India, especially in the city of Goa, but also briefly in Japan, as well as very successful missions in Central and South America, among other places. They were active in social work, interacting with kings, living in the world, and participating in the culture. Hence, we have many stories of Jesuits even from outside sources, as they become quite famous even by the early period. One such example we find in Mughal India, where the famous Muslim king Akbar sometimes known as Akbar the Great, ruled as one of the most powerful monarchs in Indian history. He was a quite interesting guy on several levels, though, and was what some would perhaps describe as quite open-minded. He was deeply interested in different religions and forms of spirituality, while he himself being a devout Muslim. This interest went so far that he established a kind of salon that he called the Ibadat Khana, the house of worship, where he would invite people from various different religious traditions to meet and discuss religion and philosophy through friendly conversation. Although the discussions weren't always that friendly in the end, unfortunately. He even then seems to have established something called the Deen Ilahi, or the divine religion, based on a kind of synthetic approach to all these diverse religions. In any case, as the official representatives of Christianity in these discussions, 3 Jesuits attended the Ibadat Khana in 1580. Being highly learned, of course, and focused on pedagogy, they were obviously very well suited for this task. In any case, the strategies and approaches to this missionary activity that the Jesuits took really set them apart from earlier such ventures. Aside from this building of schools, the Jesuits made an effort to meet local populations where they were. So, for example, they didn't wear any specific habit or clothing like other orders did, but instead were instructed to adopt local clothing customs and culture, to actually learn and connect with the culture and the people they encountered. To get a better overview of this, we can look at 2 case studies, Japan and slightly a bit of China and South America. The mission to Japan is one of the early success stories for the Jesuits, but also one of the greatest tragedies of the same time. Francis Xavier had appeared in the country in 1549, and along with his fellow travelers, he was deeply impressed with the native Japanese culture, their morals and customs, writing that they are, quote, the finest yet discovered. They are good and not malicious, with a marvelous sense of honor and esteem for it. As would become standard, Xavier and the others decided to get rid of their old clerical clothing and instead adopt the local culture, specifically adorning very fine robes to impress the daimyo, the sort of shogun, the leader there. This process of assimilation continued with the later arrival of the famous Alessandro Vallegano in 1579, who also had a similar approach. He would open up schools of art for the newcomers to learn about the church, for example. This mission in Japan was very successful, and by the early 1600s, there were as many as 300,000 Christians in Japan, all recently converted thanks to the Jesuits. The way the clergy adapted to local culture in terms of clothing and customs is characteristic of the Jesuits, and this can also be seen in the fascinating architecture. As they had churches built in the country, they often took inspiration directly from Buddhist temples, for example, in terms of the look of these churches, as well as having connected gardens and these larger structures that temples would often have. So the churches were sort of modeled after those temples. But it was also soon thereafter that tragedy struck. More and more skepticism started to build towards these newcomers from the West, specifically as the political situation got more tense in the country and the Japanese were growing tense and suspicious as to the intentions of the Spanish and Portuguese and their trade efforts there in the country. The Jesuits were then assumed to be basically working for the Spanish by preparing the country for a full invasion, and this led to mass persecution and execution of Christians in the country. In 1597, for example, 26 Christians were famously crucified in Nagasaki. Christian monasteries and homes were sometimes burned, even at the instigation of rebellion by Buddhist monks, and in 1614, all missionaries were expelled from the country. Furthermore, the Christians still living in Japan were then forced to go back to being Buddhists, essentially. The story about the mission in Japan is thus multifaceted. It was originally very successful, but also quite abruptly turned sour and into a complete disaster. This is a story, the aftermath of which was captured on film by Martin Scorsese in his film Silence. But again, it's a good example to show the kind of strategies of assimilation and cultural adoption that the Jesuits often used. To extend this discussion, we can also look briefly at China, where they went after Japan, essentially. And here they, of course, also encountered very strong local traditions like Confucianism. And in a move that would prove to be very controversial later on, the Jesuits basically argued that Confucianism was indeed essentially compatible with Christianity, and the many rites that were performed by the Confucians were only civic rites and not of religious significance, which allowed the Christians, even those that had converted, to still participate in the Confucian rites and practices. We'll return to this discussion also a bit later on. Another very interesting and famous example that we can look at is the missions in South America, perhaps especially in Paraguay, where the Jesuits established the so-called reductions. While the missionaries often met with opposition from native populations, among the so-called Guarani people, things went better, and they established in Paraguay self-governing settlements of native populations. The Jesuits who lived in each reduction were the ultimate leaders of these settlements, of course, and many still see this as a kind of just another form of colonialism, of course, but the reductions were quite unique in their self-governing nature by the natives themselves. In these settlements, or reductions, the aim would basically be that of civilizing the natives, right? To make them Christian and educate them in the European culture and style. But there was also the express aim of protecting the population from slave trade, which was ravaging the country. By establishing these reductions, the population were mostly safe from these slave traders, as well as the reach of many of the Spanish and Portuguese colonial efforts. Many thus see in this a kind of humanitarian effort as well as a missionary one. These efforts, of course, weren't always appreciated by the colonial authorities, and because of this, conflicts would often arise. This situation was also famously made into a film with The Mission, starring Robert De Niro and Jeremy Irons, which follows a group of Jesuit missionaries working to protect the native population within these reductions from the Spanish government. As we can see thus, the Jesuits in general had quite a different approach to their missionary strategies compared to many earlier kinds of missions, so to say. And in fact, the Jesuits have had a pretty massive impact on the world in terms of culture and intellectual learning, even within my own field of the humanities. The unique approach that the Jesuits had to their missionary work means that they approached native peoples and their cultures in a different way. But this approach was one where the Jesuit missionaries made a genuine effort to study and understand the culture, customs, and religions of the people from a place of curiosity and respect. Of course, the end result was always that they wanted those people to convert to Christianity, but there is a fundamental difference of approach here. Other religions and cultures weren't studied in order to be able to refute them or claim that Christianity is better per se. They wanted to understand them on their own terms, to truly get into the minds of these people and reach them directly through that understanding. And this approach of studying religion from what could be considered as a kind of relatively neutral stance, methodically and seriously engaging in investigation to map out and understand is arguably a precursor or an early example of what was to become academic fields like anthropology and the study of religions. Of course, there's a lot more that goes into the development of these fields historically, but the Jesuits and their activities is definitely one piece of that puzzle that paved the way to that. It is this structure and these activities that arguably made the Jesuits very successful early on. Quickly, they had established schools all around Europe, the Americas, and deep into Africa and East Asia. By the year 1640, 100 years after their formation, there were as many as 16,000 Jesuits active, and in many places of the world. Outside of Europe, the missions in Central and South America were arguably the most successful. These activities were also hugely significant for the Counter-Reformation and helped the Catholic Church hold the growing Protestant movement back from certain parts of Europe. But the story of the Jesuits is not a simple one. In fact, the order has gone through a number of very significant changes and transformative important events since its foundation in the 16th century. And in many ways, the order that we see today differs quite a lot from the way that it functioned back then. After a very successful first century, the Jesuits started to run into some problems, especially during the 18th, which would eventually lead to catastrophe. Over the course of the 18th century, tensions started to increasingly build as there were several controversies around the order, many of which were directly connected to some of the activities that we've already talked about. For one thing, a great controversy erupted over the activities of the order in China. As we saw before, they often made concerted efforts to understand and, in some regard, assimilate to local cultures within reasonable bounds. And in China, some of the early Jesuits there, like Matteo Ricci, tried to harmonize Confucianism with Christianity. in much the same way that someone like Thomas Aquinas had tried to harmonize the latter with Aristotle and the Greek tradition. As such, the new Christians who had converted still participated in Confucian rites, as it was argued that these were not religious in nature, but rather civic, as we saw before. But the controversy started when Franciscans and Dominicans, so members of other orders, arrived in the country and were horrified that these rituals were being performed by Catholics.
Baby.
A long back and forth debate started, where some argued that this was akin to allowing polytheism, while the Jesuits defended their position. Originally, the Pope agreed with the Jesuits, but as the debate continued and got more intense, an official decree in the early 1700s declared that Catholics were forbidden from participating in the rites. And this decree was even further clarified a few decades later. This was, of course, a huge blow to the Jesuits' reputation, and things were to get even worse. They also came into conflict with a group known as the Jansenists, named after a Dutch figure called Cornelius Jansen. He had written a work entitled Augustinus, which was essentially a tirade against the Jesuits and what he saw as their moral and religious laxity. The movement that was then named after him basically continued in this same vein, almost kind of defining themselves precisely in opposition to the Jesuits. The Jansenists were what could be called a quite puritanical and unforgiving movement in their doctrines. They criticized the Jesuits on a number of points, among them their more positive view of human nature and free will, whereas the Jansenists were much more harshly committed to the idea of original sin and not so much free will, so to say. They also criticized the Jesuits' more open attitude to quote-unquote pagan traditions and practices, as well as their just general sort of religious and moral laxity, according to the Jansenists. In response, of course, the Jesuits criticized the Jansenists as essentially crypto-Calvinists due to their very puritanical nature. And while the Jansenists never really became that widely accepted or popular within the wider church, they did get a lot of success and gain favor with the secular authorities in France and in cities like Paris. As a result, the authorities started looking with disdain on the Jesuits and basically persecuted them, so they couldn't really stay in France much anymore. Lastly, the missionary activities in South America, with the reductions in Paraguay, for example, also led to conflict with the church and its relationship with secular powers. One prominent example is, again, the aforementioned reductions in Paraguay, which turned into complete disaster in 1750. Of course, the Spanish and Portuguese slave traders had never been happy about the reductions, which protected the population from their efforts. At one point, the Jesuits even got permission to arm the natives in order to strengthen this protection. But in 1750, new borders were being drawn by the colonialists. Certain Spanish areas were to be ceded to Portugal, but these were areas that contained 7 of these reductions with tens of thousands of natives. The Spanish then basically forced these reductions to relocate, leave their homes, and resettle in new Spanish territory. The Jesuits and the natives, perhaps naturally, strongly protested this, as such a relocation would have been very dangerous to the natives. They essentially refused, and this back and forth eventually led to the so-called War of the Seven Reductions, in which they fought back. But of course, since the Jesuits had basically sided with the natives, they were implicated by the Spanish crown as disloyal and as traitors. This started a period of persecution, where the order was looked at with suspicion in Spain and Portugal, just as they had been in France due to the Jansenist controversy. As more and more kingdoms/countries essentially threw out the Jesuits and banned them, pressure was increasing for the Vatican to do something about it. The once loved and successful Society of Jesus was now losing much of their foothold and reputation. And this pressure eventually led to the shocking decision in 1773, when Pope Clement XIV officially abolished the Jesuits. This essentially ended all their activities, except in certain pockets like in Russia. Historically, this is of course a quite surprising and shocking turn of events, but even this was only to be temporary. Indeed, already by the early 19th century, things were starting to change again. With the French Revolution and other dramatic events, the countries that had been hostile to the Jesuits had other things on their minds, and also started to change quite significantly. This left the papacy with more freedom to act again, And as the reputation of the Jesuits were starting to heal, you could say, in 1814, Pope Pius
can't
VIII
do it, dude. I can't
restored
move the
Jesuit
mouse. I
order,
can't
basically sort of
press down on
bringing
the
it back
button
from the
and just
dead.
do a
But this
fine
resurrected
movement. It's
order
just
was one that was quite different from what it looked in its heyday. The 19th century was a period of great societal change, as we all know. The Enlightenment had made popular ideas that directly challenged the church and its hegemony. And of course, the Industrial Revolution brought with it societal changes that the new Jesuits had to deal with. So while the earlier Jesuits could be argued to have been pretty curious and open-minded, perhaps, being open to exploring different and new avenues of knowledge and having a lenient approach to different cultures, the new Jesuits were quite conservative and positioned themselves along with the church generally in direct opposition to the new developments like liberalism, equality, and modernism. Perhaps this is understandable given the precarious situation that the order had been in for a while. They probably felt that they had to be pretty careful so that they wouldn't be abolished again, but it's also a result of the tumultuous times, of course, that they lived in, when a lot of things were happening in the world in which the church had to react to and to process in different ways. By the early 20th century, the order had become pretty firmly established again, regaining some of their previous numbers. And again, they went through a lot of changes, partly due to the rediscovery of old Jesuit texts that sort of reacquainted them with their original character, but also, of course, because of certain external circumstances. The conservatism started to change into a more open attitude again. Especially after World War II, the whole church really felt like it had to reevaluate some of its approaches, such as its views and relationships with other religions, and the Jesuits followed suit. The Second Vatican Council, of course, had an impact here too, and by the 1960s, the Jesuits had basically become almost the opposite of what they had been in the 19th century. Instead, under leaders like the famous Pedro Arrupe, they had developed a much larger emphasis on protecting the rights of the marginalized and lower classes. This became perhaps best embodied with the development in Latin America of something known as liberation theology. This was a new approach that, just like the name suggests, put its emphasis on the liberation of the oppressed and with a specific focus on economic and social injustice. O'Malley explains it like this, quote, "In Latin America, bishops and theologians had for some years become ever more concerned about the plight and exploitation of the poor and about the injustice of the concentration of immense wealth in the hands of a minuscule percentage of the population to the detriment of the rest of society. They were critical of the Church's failure effectively to address the problem. Out of this situation arose a form of reflection on the relationship between the gospel and social issues that became known as liberation theology. Several Jesuits were prominent in developing its tenets, among which was the need for the Church to play a much more proactive role in addressing social problems. Some theologians maintain the Church had identified itself too closely with the interests of the wealthy and privileged classes. This approach was generally adopted and approved by Jesuit leadership, including Arrupe, but also became a bit controversial within the Church widely, many accusing its supporters of basically being inspired by Marxist philosophy, which of course is probably true to some degree, right? Regardless, this approach of really focusing on helping the marginalized and oppressed in society is something that still is very central and important to the Jesuits today. And given this long and complicated history, the fact that in 2013,
like in competition
the
with it, like
Cardinals
it's
chose
shut
a
off,
Jesuit
right? It's
to become the new
off,
Pope,
right? No, it just
Pope
keeps
Francis,
blowing and blowing.
was
I'm
quite
like, dude,
surprising and even
it's
shocking
cold,
to
like,
realize.
But
Pope Francis is in fact a good case in point, as he really embodied this more modern character of the Jesuits in many ways through his focus on the marginalized, on the poor, and on refugees. When I was in the Vatican recently, I saw the beautiful monument to refugees that Pope Francis had commissioned, which again is characteristic of his Jesuit background, as well as his namesake, St. Francis. And that's basically where we stand today. The Society of Jesus, or the Jesuits, still stand as one of the most significant and major religious orders within the Catholic Church, and one that has a close, albeit sometimes complicated, relationship with the papacy. A strongly missionary character and its focus on education,
I didn't want any of this, and you did it on purpose.
And his friends
I'm done.
still remain fundamental.
You can only play this game so long,
and
dude.
with the papacy of Pope Francis, the order most likely entered a new phase of their history, the repercussions of which we still
Fucking
it remains
shirt.
to be seen.
Just constantly
The
rubbing
Jesuits are a
against you.
very
I
interesting
gotta
order
take a
with a
break,
long
dude.
and
I gotta take a
complicated
break.
history
I can't
within the
stand
Catholic
you
Church,
right now.
and one that still is very
I
significant
can't stand
today.
you. I just need a break away
Thank you so
from you
much for
right now,
listening and
dude.
for watching. I would like to
Mr.
thank
Miracle.
especially my patrons over on
Mr. See
patreon.com
all,
who support me
miracle all, Murphy's
monetarily.
Law.
And again, this
Just
is really
right
the best
now,
way
I
to
just
support my
need
work
a
here,
break
bringing
from
free
you, dude.
content on the world's religions and mysticisms and philosophies. So
Need a break.
I
I'm
would highly
hungry.
appreciate anyone who wants
Drink some
to
water.
become patrons as well. So
Need
there
a
are links to
break.
that in the
Need a break
description.
here.
You can also support by giving a one-time donation through PayPal. I'm releasing a new song. I'm a musician as well, as many of you know, and I'm releasing a new single called Tasting with my project Zini on September 5th. I'd really appreciate if you wanted to check that out. So you can find links to that, either the pre-save if this is before it comes out, or if you're watching after September 5th, there's going to be links to the song itself in the description in my link tree. So check that out and let me know what you think. In general, follow me on my socials to keep up with what I'm doing, and on my other channel, Through the Palm specifically, to follow my music activities, my own music, and content about music. So again, thank you all for supporting me, for watching and engaging with this content. It really is a privilege in so many ways for me to be doing this. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, and I'll see you next time.